Ambassador Kethavar watched the humans enter the Galactic Council chamber with the same confusion he felt every time. The tall, pink-skinned creatures moved through the massive hall like water flowing around rocks. They nodded politely to other delegates, smiled their strange tooth-bearing grins, and made their way to the back rows of seats. Always the back rows. Kethavar's purple tentacles twitched with annoyance. As a Zephyrian, he could read the thoughts of most species from across a room. His people had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years because they understood power. Power meant taking the best position. Power meant being seen. Power meant sitting where everyone knew you belonged at the top. The Karathi delegation thundered past him, their massive armored bodies shaking the floor. These warrior bears had conquered 40 systems through pure strength. They took the front row center seats just as they should. Their leader, General Thokmar, slammed his clawed fist on the table to claim his space. Behind them, the ethereal luminari floated to their preferred spots in the second row. These energy beings controlled the galaxy's communication networks. They glowed brighter as they settled into their seats, making sure everyone saw their importance. The insect-like hive queens clicked and buzzed as they arranged themselves in the third row. Even the machine species constructors rolled forward on their metal wheels to claim good seats near the front. But the humans? They walked past all the empty front seats. They stepped around the middle sections. They climbed the stairs to the back of the chamber and sat down quietly. Kethavar had been watching this pattern for 2 standard years now. Every single meeting, the humans did the same thing. It made no sense. These creatures had survived first contact with 17 different hostile species. That was more than any other race in galactic history. The Karathi had only survived 12 first contacts before joining the Council. The Zephyrians themselves had managed 15. So why did the humans act like prey animals? Strange, are they not? The voice belonged to Scholar Vextai, one of the Luminari's brightest minds. The energy being had drifted over to Kethavar's position. Very strange, Kethavar agreed. His mental tendrils reached out, trying to read the humans' thoughts from across the room. All he got back was static. Human minds were surprisingly hard to read, full of random noise and scattered thinking. My people believe they suffer from pack anxiety, Vextai continued. Perhaps their social structure makes them afraid of authority figures. Kethavar studied the human delegation. Ambassador Sarah Martinez sat with perfect posture, her dark eyes scanning the room. Next to her, General Hayes wore his military uniform with quiet confidence. Either looked anxious or afraid. The Karathi think differently, Kethavar said. General Thokmar believes humans are natural prey. He says their behavior proves they know their place in the food chain. Interesting theory. Vexitai's glow dimmed slightly, which meant deep thought among his species. But prey animals usually huddle together for protection. The humans spread out across the entire back section. This was true. Kethavar had noticed it too. The humans never sat close together. They left empty seats between themselves, creating a wide line across the back rows. It looked almost like a military formation. The council session began with the usual opening ceremonies. Chancellor Mordak, an ancient Zephyrian who had held power for 800 years, called for order. Representatives from 63 species filled the chamber. Trade disputes, territorial claims, and resource allocation requests filled the agenda. Kethavar tried to focus on the proceedings, but his attention kept drifting to the humans. Ambassador Martinez spoke only when asked direct questions. She gave clear, short answers. She never tried to grab attention or demand speaking time like the other delegates, but something else bothered Kethavar. Every few minutes, the humans would glance around the room. Not obvious head turns, just quick eye movements. They seemed to be tracking every other delegate's position and mood. When the Karathi delegate stood up to argue about mining rights, all the human eyes immediately focused on him. When 2 hive queens started clicking angrily at each other, the humans turned their attention there. It was like they were watching for threats that did not exist in a peaceful council chamber. During the lunch break, Kethavar decided to investigate. He approached Ambassador Martinez as she stood near one of the large windows overlooking the station's central hub. Ambassador Martinez, he said, using the human's preferred formal greeting, might I ask you a question about your delegation's seating preferences? The human woman turned to face him. Her brown eyes met his without fear or submission. Most species found Zephyrian faces disturbing, with their large black eyes and writhing facial tentacles. Humans seemed immune to such intimidation. Of course, Ambassador Kethvar. What would you like to know? My people have noticed that humans always choose seats in the rear of the chamber. This is unusual behavior among council members. Most species prefer forward positions to display their importance. Martinez smiled that strange human expression. We find the back rows more comfortable. Better view of the proceedings. Better view. Kethvar's tentacles curled with confusion. Surely the front rows provide a superior view of the speakers. Different kind of view, Martinez said. Her eyes swept across the lunch area, taking in the positions of every delegate group. We like to see the whole picture. Before Kethvar could ask more questions, General Hayes joined them. The human military leader carried himself with obvious confidence, but he also chose to stand with his back near the wall. Problem, Ambassador? Hayes asked Martinez. No problem, General. Ambassador Kethvar was curious about our seating arrangements. Hayes nodded to Kethvar. Habit, I suppose. We learn early to take positions where we can observe and react. React to what? Kethvar asked. This is a peaceful diplomatic facility. There are no threats here. The two humans exchanged a quick glance. It lasted only a second, but Kethvar caught something in their expressions. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Old habits, Martinez said simply. Our species has a long history of needing to stay alert. But you are apex predators on your homeworld, Kethvar pressed. Your files indicate humans have no natural enemies on Earth. Not anymore, Hayes said quietly. But we remember when we did. The conversation ended when other delegates approached to discuss trade agreements. But Kethvar left the lunch break with more questions than answers. That evening, he accessed the Galactic database and pulled up every file on human behavior. The records showed the same pattern everywhere humans went. Restaurants, entertainment venues, transport ships, even their own military facilities. Humans consistently chose positions in the back or along walls. The files also contained combat reports from the 17 first contacts. Kethvar read through each one carefully. A pattern emerged that chilled his Zephyrian blood. In every single encounter, when attacked by hostile species, the humans had immediately fallen back to defensive positions. But these were not retreats. They were tactical withdrawals to better fighting positions. The humans had turned every retreat into a killing ground. The Ravager horde had attacked a human colony ship with overwhelming numbers. The humans had fallen back to the ship's rear sections, then used the narrow corridors to destroy the attackers piece by piece. The Crystal Devourers had assaulted a human research station. The humans had abandoned the front laboratories and made their stand in the back storage areas, where they could control access points and use stored equipment as weapons. Even the mighty Void Stalkers, who hunted by phasing through solid matter, had been defeated when humans retreated to positions where the alien hunters could not use their abilities effectively. Kethvar leaned back in his chair, his tentacles writhing with a new understanding. The humans did not choose the back row because they were weak or afraid. They chose it because they were predators who had learned to think like prey. But that raised an even more disturbing question. What kind of environment would force an apex predator species to develop such extreme caution? What had the humans faced in their evolution that made them assume every situation was potentially deadly? Kethvar decided he needed to observe the humans more closely. The answer to their behavior might be the key to understanding why this seemingly weak species had survived everything the galaxy threw at them. The next morning, he submitted a request to study human cultural patterns. It was approved immediately. After all, what threat could such a careful, peaceful species possibly represent? Ambassador Kethvar had no idea he was about to discover the most dangerous truth in the galaxy. 3 weeks after receiving permission to study human culture, Ambassador Kethvar found himself on board the human merchant vessel, Starwalker. The ship's captain, a weathered woman named Chen, had agreed to let him observe daily life among her crew. Kethvar had expected to find answers quickly. Instead, he discovered the pattern was even stranger than he had realized. The ship's mess hall was his first surprise. During mealtimes, the crew naturally spread out across the available tables. But they did not spread randomly. Every single human chose seats that put their backs to walls or bulkheads. Those who could not find wall seats positioned themselves where they could see all entrances to the room. Captain Chen, Kethvar asked during his 3rd day aboard, "Why does your crew avoid sitting in the center of the mess hall?" Chen looked up from her meal, a simple protein paste that humans seemed to enjoy despite its bland appearance. "Do we?" I had not noticed, but she had noticed. Kethavar's telepathic abilities might struggle with human thoughts, but he could read surface emotions clearly enough. Chen was aware of the seating pattern. She simply considered it normal. On Zephyrian ships, crew members sit wherever food is served, Kethavar explained. Efficiency determines seating, not position. Huh? Chen glanced around the mess hall. 23 humans sat at various tables, and every single one had their back protected and a clear view of potential exits. I guess we like to see what's coming, but nothing is coming. This is a peaceful trade route. Chen's expression changed slightly. Her eyes grew distant, and Kethavar caught a flicker of something ancient in her thoughts. Space is big, Ambassador. Lots of empty between the stars. You never know what might be hiding out there. The pattern continued everywhere Kethavar looked. In the ship's recreation room, humans playing games always positioned themselves to observe the entire space. During work shifts, crew members assigned to forward sections of the ship frequently turned to check behind them. Even in their private quarters, humans arranged their furniture so their beds faced the doors. Most disturbing of all was the ship's bridge. Captain Chen's command chair sat at the back of the bridge, elevated above the other stations. From there, she could see every crew member and monitor every display. When Kethavar asked why human ships put command positions in the rear, Chen seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. Where else would you put them? How can you command what you cannot see? Zephyrian commanders sit at the front of their bridges, Kethavar explained. It demonstrates leadership and courage. Seems like it would demonstrate poor tactical thinking, Chen replied. What if you need to retreat? What if enemies board your ship? What if your own crew turns against you? These were not theoretical concerns for Captain. Kethavar realized she genuinely considered all these scenarios, possible during routine merchant operations. His investigation expanded when the Starwalker docked at Harmony Station, a massive trading hub jointly operated by 6 different species. Kethavar watched human civilians as they moved through the station's public areas. In restaurants, human families requested tables along walls or in corners. When such tables were not available, they chose seats that provided the widest possible view of other diners. Parents positioned themselves where they could watch both their children and potential threats. In shopping areas, humans browsed merchandise while maintaining awareness of everyone around them. They kept their backs to walls when possible and avoided crowded center aisles. Store clerks, Kethavar noticed, often positioned themselves near emergency exits rather than in prominent display areas. The pattern held even in entertainment venues. At a concert featuring popular Luminari energy music, humans clustered in the back sections of the amphitheater. They applauded and seemed to enjoy the performance, but they never lost themselves in the experience the way other species did. Kethavar tried an experiment. He arranged to attend a diplomatic reception with several human delegates. The party took place in a large ballroom with food stations scattered throughout. Other species mingled freely, moving from group to group without apparent concern for positioning. The humans behaved differently. They entered the ballroom and immediately spread out along the walls. They engaged in conversations and seemed to enjoy themselves, but they never moved far from escape routes. When they did venture toward the center of the room, they did so quickly and returned to wall positions as soon as politely possible. Are you studying us, Ambassador Kethavar? The question came from Dr. James Park, a human xenobiologist attending the reception. I am trying to understand human social patterns, Kethavar admitted. Your species' behavior is unlike anything in our databases. Dr. Park smiled and took a sip of his drink. Like every other human at the party, he stood with his back near a wall. What specifically puzzles you? Your positioning choices. Humans consistently select locations that prioritize observation and escape routes over social advantage or comfort. Interesting perspective. Dr. Park's eyes swept the ballroom, taking in the positions of various delegate groups. What positioning would you consider normal? Kethavar gestured toward the center of the room, where Karathi delegates had claimed the most prominent space near the largest food display. Most species seek positions that demonstrate status or provide access to resources. And if something goes wrong? Wrong? This is a diplomatic reception. What could go wrong? Dr. Park's expression grew thoughtful. Fires, structural failures, medical emergencies, hostile actions by unstable individuals, equipment malfunctions, natural disasters. The list continued for several more possibilities. Kethavar realized that Dr. Park was not listing unlikely scenarios. He was running through a mental checklist of threats he genuinely considered possible. "Do you always think this way?" Kethavar asked. "Think what way?" "About potential dangers in safe environments." Dr. Park considered the question seriously. "I suppose we do. But they are not always safe, are they? The Zephyrian Empire has been peaceful for 3,000 years, but before that, your people conquered half the galaxy through military force." This was true, but it had happened so long ago that most Zephyrians considered it ancient history. Dr. Park spoke as if it might happen again tomorrow. "My people have learned from experience," Dr. Park continued. "Environments that appear safe can become dangerous very quickly. It pays to be prepared." "What experience?" Kethavar asked. "Human records show your species has been relatively peaceful since achieving spaceflight." Dr. Park laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Ambassador, we have been fighting for survival since before we learned to make fire. Every generation of humans has faced threats that could have wiped us out. We remember those lessons." That night, Kethavar accessed historical databases about human evolution. What he found disturbed him more than he expected. Humans had evolved on a planet filled with creatures larger, stronger, and more naturally armed than they were. For hundreds of thousands of years, early humans had been prey animals. They survived not through strength or speed, but through intelligence and paranoia. The records showed that early humans lived in constant fear of predators. They developed elaborate warning systems, escape routes, and defensive strategies. They learned to assume that every shadow might hide a threat, that every sound might signal danger. But what shocked Kethavar most was that humans had never stopped thinking this way. Even after becoming the dominant species on their planet, they continued to plan for threats. Their entire civilization was built around the assumption that something was always trying to kill them. Human cities had multiple evacuation routes. Human buildings included emergency shelters. Human transportation systems had backup systems for their backup systems. Even human entertainment included stories about surviving impossible threats. Kethavar began to understand why humans always chose the back row. They were not displaying weakness or submission. They were positioning themselves as survivors who assumed the worst and planned accordingly. But this raised new questions that made Kethavar's tentacles curl with unease. If humans were this paranoid and careful during peaceful times, what were they like when actually threatened? What kind of opponents would they become if someone forced them to fight for survival? The ambassador requested permission to observe human military exercises. He told his superiors it was part of his cultural study. In reality, he was beginning to suspect that the galaxy's most underestimated species might also be its most dangerous. 3 days later, he received approval to visit a human training facility. Kethavar had no idea he was about to witness capabilities that would change his understanding of warfare forever. The humans were not just survivors. They were survivors who had spent millions of years learning how to fight back. The human training facility on Kepler 442b looked ordinary from the outside. Simple metal buildings scattered across a rocky landscape, with landing pads for small ships and basic communication arrays. Kethavar had expected something more impressive from a species that had survived 17 first contacts. Colonel Sarah Hayes met him at the landing pad. She was the sister of General Hayes from the Galactic Council, and she carried herself with the same quiet confidence that puzzled Kethavar about all humans. "Welcome to Training Ground 7, Ambassador," she said. "We appreciate your interest in our military education programs." "Thank you for allowing me to observe," Kethavar replied. "I hope to better understand human tactical thinking." Colonel Hayes smiled that strange human expression. "I think you'll find our methods interesting." She led him to an observation bunker overlooking a valley filled with artificial structures. Mock buildings, vehicle barriers, and communication towers created a small city environment. 2 groups of human soldiers waited at opposite ends of the valley. "Today's exercise is a standard urban assault scenario," Hayes explained. "Red team will attack the central objectives while blue team defends." Kethavar settled into the observation post and activated his recording equipment. He expected to see typical military tactics similar to those used by the Karathi or other warrior species. Direct assaults, overwhelming firepower, and displays of individual courage. What he witnessed instead changed everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. The red team assault began conventionally enough. 20 soldiers advanced toward the mock city center, using cover and coordinated movement. But something felt different about their approach. Where Karathi warriors would charge forward with roaring battle cries, the humans moved silently. Where other species would focus on their immediate objectives, the humans constantly checked their flanks and rear positions. Notice how they advance, Colonel Hayes pointed out. Every soldier knows where every other soldier is positioned. They never leave gaps in their formation. The blue team's defensive response was even more unusual. Instead of manning the frontline buildings as expected, they had positioned themselves in structures with clear views of multiple approach routes. When the red team assault began, the defenders did not hold their ground and fight. They fell back, but it was not a retreat. Kethavar realized that the blue team was drawing the attackers into carefully prepared positions. As the red team advanced deeper into the mock city, they found themselves under fire from unexpected angles. Buildings they thought were empty contained hidden defenders. Routes that appeared safe became killing zones. Fascinating, Kethavar murmured. They are not fighting where the enemy expects them to fight. Exactly, Hayes agreed. We learned long ago that fighting fair is a good way to die. Better to fight smart. The exercise continued for 2 hours. The red team eventually secured their objectives, but only after taking heavy simulated casualties. More importantly to Kethavar, both sides had demonstrated tactics he had never seen before. They fought as if every advantage was temporary, every position was compromised, and every victory might turn into defeat at any moment. Your soldiers assume they will lose, Kethavar observed. Our soldiers assume nothing, Hayes corrected. They prepare for everything. 3 days later, Kethavar got a chance to see what humans did when they were not preparing. He was observing an archaeological expedition on the edge of the system when everything went wrong. The joint research team included 12 humans, 8 luminary energy beings, and 5 constructors. They were excavating ruins left by an ancient civilization when the attack came without warning. Pirate ships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately opened fire on the research vessels orbiting the planet. The lead pirate captain broadcast a simple message: surrender your technology and artifacts, or we will take them from your corpses. Kethavar watched from the expedition's mobile command center as chaos erupted around the dig site. The luminary immediately tried to open communication channels, hoping to negotiate. The constructors began calculating optimal surrender scenarios to minimize casualties. The humans did something completely different. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the expedition leader, was giving orders before the pirate transmission finished. All personnel to secondary positions. Implement Protocol 7. Emergency power to defensive systems. Secondary positions? Kethavar asked. Should we not prepare to surrender or negotiate? Dr. Vasquez glanced at him while pulling equipment from storage containers. Protocol 7 assumes we're about to be attacked by hostile forces with superior numbers and firepower. We fall back to prepared positions and make them pay for every meter. But there are 60 pirates and only 12 of you. Exactly why we're not fighting them where they expect to fight us. The humans scattered across the dig site with practiced efficiency, but they were not running away. Kethavar watched in fascination as they took positions on elevated ridges and in excavated trenches that provided clear fields of fire across the landing areas. Within minutes, the human archaeologists had transformed themselves into a defensive network that covered every possible approach to the ruins. They used their excavation equipment as weapons, their survey drones as reconnaissance units, and their geological knowledge to predict exactly where attackers would try to land. When the pirates landed, they expected to face a dozen terrified scientists. Instead, they walked into a carefully orchestrated ambush. The first pirate shuttle touched down in what appeared to be an open area near the main excavation. Hidden charges, originally intended for archaeological work, detonated beneath the landing site. The shuttle crashed and burned before its occupants could disembark. The second shuttle tried to land behind the research buildings, thinking it would provide cover. Dr. Vasquez had positioned 3 humans on the ridge above that area. They used mining lasers to cut the shuttle's engines while it was still airborne. The third shuttle managed to land successfully and disgorged 20 armed pirates. They charged toward the main dig site, expecting easy victory against unarmed scientists. They discovered that human archaeologists were apparently very well-armed scientists. The humans had turned their entire research site into a fortress. Every excavation pit became a firing position. Every equipment shelter became a bunker. The pirates found themselves trapped in a crossfire between enemies they could not see, taking fire from weapons they did not recognize. "How did you prepare for this?" Kethvar asked Dr. Vasquez as she calmly coordinated the defense from a camouflaged position. "Standard procedure," she replied, while directing suppressing fire toward a group of pirates trying to flank their position. "Anytime we establish a research site, we identify potential defensive positions and escape routes. You never know what might try to kill you in uncharted territory. But you are archaeologists, not soldiers. We are humans," Dr. Vasquez said simply. "We assume everything wants to kill us until proven otherwise." The battle ended 20 minutes later. 60 pirates had been reduced to 12 survivors who begged for mercy. The human archaeological team had suffered 2 minor injuries and no casualties. As Kethvar helped treat the wounded pirates, he realized something that chilled his Zephyrian blood. The humans had not been lucky. They had not been desperate. They had been prepared for exactly this situation. Every human on the expedition team had known what to do when attacked. They had practiced these scenarios. They had planned for this exact type of threat. Most disturbing of all, they acted as if pirate attacks on archaeological expeditions were normal and expected events. "How often does this happen?" Kethvar asked Dr. Vasquez as she secured the captured pirates. "Often enough," she replied. "Human expeditions get attacked about once every 6 months. Sometimes pirates, sometimes hostile aliens, sometimes automated defense systems left by dead civilizations." "And you always win?" Dr. Vasquez checked her equipment and began packing up the defensive positions. "We always survive. Sometimes that means winning. Sometimes that means running away. The important thing is that we go home." That night, as Kethvar reviewed recordings of the battle, he finally understood what made humans so dangerous. They did not choose the back row because they were weak. They chose it because they were survivors who had learned that the best way to survive was to always assume someone was trying to kill them. But more than that, they had learned to be very good at killing back. The humans were not prey animals who had learned to fight. They were predators who had learned to think like prey. They combined the careful planning of hunted creatures with the deadly skills of apex hunters. As he transmitted his report to the Zephyrian High Command, Kethvar included a new recommendation. Any species that underestimated humans based on their careful defensive behavior was making a potentially fatal mistake. The galaxy's most dangerous species was not the one that looked most threatening. It was the one that always assumed it was being threatened. Kethvar requested permission to study human history on their homeworld. He needed to understand how a species could become so perfectly adapted for survival in a hostile universe. He had no idea that his investigation was about to reveal the most terrifying truth in galactic history. Earth hung in the viewing port like a blue and white jewel against the black of space. Kethvar had studied images of the human homeworld for months, but seeing it in person was different. The planet looked peaceful, almost fragile. It was hard to believe that such a beautiful world had produced the galaxy's most paranoid species. Dr. Sarah Chen stood beside him on the observation deck of the research vessel, Discovery. She was a xenoarchaeologist who specialized in human evolutionary history, and she had agreed to guide Kethvar through the sites that would explain her species' unique psychology. "Beautiful, is it not?" Dr. Chen said, following his gaze toward her homeworld. "Very beautiful," Kethvar agreed. "It appears quite peaceful." Dr. Chen laughed, but there was something dark in the sound. "Appearances can be deceiving, Ambassador. Earth has never been peaceful. Not for us." Their first stop was a cave system in what humans called Europe. The caves had been carved by water millions of years ago, but humans had lived in them for tens of thousands of years. Dr. Chen led Kethvar deep into the limestone passages, past ancient paintings and tool fragments. "These caves tell the story of early human survival," she explained, shining her light on paintings that covered the rough walls. "Our ancestors lived here during the ice ages when most of the planet was frozen and hostile." Kethvar studied the paintings with growing unease. They showed humans, but they also showed other creatures. Large fanged beasts that towered over the human figures, massive cats with blade-like teeth, bears that stood 3 times human height, flying creatures with wingspans that dwarfed adult humans. "Your ancestors shared this planet with impressive predators," Kethvar observed. "Shared is not the right word," Dr. Chen corrected. "We were prey. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were food for everything larger than us. She pointed to a particularly detailed painting that showed humans hiding in trees while massive cats prowled below. Saber-tooth cats. They could kill an adult human with a single bite. Our ancestors had to sleep in shifts because these hunters were active day and night. The cave paintings revealed a pattern that made Kethvar's tentacles twitch with recognition. Every scene showed humans positioning themselves defensively. They climbed to high places. They gathered in groups with clear sight lines. They always had escape routes planned. Even then, you chose the back row, he murmured. We chose to survive, Dr. Chen said. Look at this section. She led him to a wall covered with what appeared to be maps. Crude drawings showed the cave system from above with symbols marking different passages and chambers. These are escape route plans, Dr. Chen explained. Our ancestors mapped every tunnel, every hidden passage, every way out of these caves. When predators found them, they did not fight. They ran to prepared positions deeper in the cave system. But eventually, humans became the dominant species on Earth, Kethvar said. How did prey animals become apex predators? Dr. Chen's expression grew grim. We learned to hunt the hunters. She led him to another section of the cave where the paintings told a different story. These images showed humans working together in large groups, surrounding massive beasts with spears and fire. But even in their hunting scenes, the humans maintained defensive formations and escape routes. We became predators, but we never stopped thinking like prey, Dr. Chen said. Every hunt was planned like a military operation. Every camp was positioned for defense. Every tool was designed with survival in mind. They spent 3 days exploring different cave systems across Europe and Africa. The pattern was consistent everywhere. Human ancestors had lived in constant fear of death, and they had responded by becoming the most prepared species on the planet. But the predators are gone now, Kethvar pointed out as they examined 30,000-year-old paintings. Humans eliminated or tamed all the dangerous species on Earth. Why did you not relax your survival instincts? Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of species memory. Because the predators were not the worst thing we faced, Ambassador. The worst thing we faced was each other. Their next stop was a human, historical site called Troy. Ancient ruins scattered across a hillside told the story of a city that had been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times over thousands of years. Human civilizations rose and fell like waves on a beach, Dr. Chen explained as they walked through the excavated foundations. Each time we built something beautiful, someone else came to take it away. She showed him evidence of siege warfare that had lasted for years. Defensive walls built on top of older defensive walls, tunnel systems designed for escape during attacks, hidden storage areas for supplies during long sieges. We learned that other humans were often more dangerous than any natural predator, she continued. Animals killed for food or territory. Humans killed for resources, ideology, revenge, or sometimes just because they could. Kethvar studied the ruins with growing understanding. Every human settlement had been built like a fortress. Every city had multiple escape routes. Every building was positioned to provide defensive advantages. You never felt safe, he realized. Never, Dr. Chen confirmed. For our entire history, we have lived with the knowledge that someone or something was trying to kill us. Sometimes it was animals. Sometimes it was disease. Sometimes it was natural disasters. Most often it was other humans. They visited battlefield sites across the planet, places where humans had fought other humans with increasingly sophisticated weapons. The pattern never changed. Even when humans developed technology that made them the most dangerous species on Earth, they continued to plan for defeat. Look at this, Dr. Chen said, showing him plans for a human city called London during something called World War II. Enemy bombs fell on this city every night for months. The humans built underground tunnel systems to shelter millions of people. The tunnel plans showed the same paranoid thinking Kethvar had observed in modern humans. Multiple entrances and exits, defensive positions, supply storage areas, communication systems. The humans had turned their entire city into a massive bunker. But you won that war, Kethvar said. Your species was victorious. We survived that war, Dr. Chen corrected. Victory was just a bonus. The important thing was that our civilization continued to exist. Their final stop was a modern human city called Geneva. Dr. Chen showed him how contemporary humans still built their cities with survival in mind. Emergency evacuation routes, underground shelters, backup power systems. Communication networks designed to function during disasters. Even now, when you are the dominant species in the galaxy, you plan for destruction, Kethvar observed. Especially now, Dr. Chen said. The galaxy is full of species more advanced than us, more powerful, more numerous. We know that our current position is temporary. Something will eventually challenge human civilization, just like something always has. They stood on an observation platform overlooking the city as the sun set behind the mountains. Humans moved through the streets below, going about their daily lives. But Kethvar could now see the patterns he had missed before. The humans naturally avoided crowded areas when possible. They chose routes that provided multiple options if they needed to change direction quickly. They positioned themselves in restaurants and shops where they could observe potential threats. Even in their own cities, on their own world, they maintained the cautious awareness of prey animals. We choose the back row, because that is where survivors sit, Dr. Chen said quietly. Not because we are weak, but because we remember what happens to the strong when they stop being careful. Your entire species has post-traumatic stress disorder, Kethvar realized. Our entire species has survival instincts, Dr. Chen replied. We learned them over millions of years of nearly dying. We are not going to forget them just because we happen to be temporarily safe. As their ship left Earth's orbit, Kethvar reviewed everything he had learned. The humans were not simply paranoid. They were a species shaped by constant threat into perfect survivors. They assumed the worst because the worst had happened to them repeatedly throughout their history. But more disturbing was the realization that humans did not see their survival instincts as a burden. They saw them as an advantage. They had turned paranoia into a strategic asset and caution into a weapon. The galaxy thought humans were harmless because they acted defensively. But Kethvar now understood that defensive thinking did not mean defensive capability. The humans had spent millions of years learning how to turn defensive positions into death traps for their enemies. Any species that tried to hunt these former prey animals was going to discover that the humans had become very, very good at hunting back. As he began writing his final report, Kethvar included a warning that he hoped his superiors would take seriously. The galaxy's most underestimated species was also its most dangerous, precisely because they had learned to survive everything the universe could throw at them, and they were still learning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began at dawn station time. Kethvar had never seen the great chamber filled with such fear. Representatives from 63 species packed the hall, their voices creating a cacophony of panic that echoed off the curved walls. The Devourer swarm had emerged from dark space 3 days ago. Massive biomechanical entities that consumed entire solar systems for resources. They had already destroyed the outer colonies of the hegemony and were moving toward the core worlds. 12 civilizations had fallen to them in the past. Now it was the galaxy's turn to face extinction. Kethvar watched the proceedings from his usual position in the third row. After 6 months of studying humans, he had developed new respect for strategic positioning. His people's front row seats suddenly seemed less like displays of power, and more like targets for anyone who wanted to eliminate leadership. Chancellor Mordak called for order, but his ancient voice carried a tremor that Kethvar had never heard before. Representatives, we face the greatest threat in galactic history. The Devourer swarm has breached our outer defenses and will reach the core systems in 47 standard days. General Thokmar of the Karathi slammed his massive fist on his table. We must strike first. Gather every warship, every weapon, every warrior. We will meet them in glorious battle and die with honor. Roars of approval rose from the warrior species. The hegemony military leaders agreed. Even the usually peaceful Luminari spoke of organizing a massive fleet to confront the Devourers in direct combat. Kethvar noticed that the humans said nothing. They sat in their usual positions in the back rows, listening to the increasingly desperate battle plans being proposed. Ambassador Martinez took notes on a simple tablet, her expression calm. General Hayes watched the other delegates with the same alert awareness. Kethvar had learned to recognize the combined fleet will number over 10,000 ships, announced Admiral Fortak of the Hegemony Navy. We will meet the Devourers at the nexus point and destroy them before they can advance. Further, more cheers erupted from the warrior delegations. Even Kethvar felt a surge of hope. 10,000 ships was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Ambassador Martinez, Chancellor Mordak said, his voice cutting through the celebration. "The human delegation has been unusually quiet. What does Earth contribute to our grand fleet?" Ambassador Martinez stood slowly. She did not move to the center of the chamber like other speakers. She remained in her back row position, her voice clear but not loud. "Earth can provide 200 ships," she said simply. The chamber erupted in disappointed murmurs. 200 ships was barely 2% of the proposed fleet. General Thokmar snorted with contempt. 200 ships? He growled. The mighty humans who survived 17 first contacts can spare only 200 ships for the battle to save the galaxy? 200 ships is our contribution to the fleet, Martinez replied calmly. However, Earth does not believe the fleet will succeed. Shocked silence filled the chamber. Several delegates stood to voice outrage at this apparent betrayal. "The Devourers have destroyed 12 civilizations," Martinez continued, her voice cutting through the angry protests. "Each of those civilizations tried direct military confrontation. Each of them failed, despite having larger fleets than we can assemble." "Then what do you propose?" Chancellor Mordek asked. "Surrender? Survival," General Hayes said, standing beside Martinez. "We propose that the galaxy learn to fight like humans." More protests erupted, but Kethvar found himself leaning forward to listen. After months of studying human tactics, he wanted to hear their alternative plan. "The Devourers are stronger than us," Martinez said when the noise died down. "They are more numerous. They have better technology. Fighting them directly is suicide. Then we die with honor," General Thokmar declared. "Or we live without it," Hayes replied. Ambassador Kethvar recently completed a study of human tactical thinking. Perhaps he would like to explain why humans always choose the back row. Every eye in the chamber turned to Kethvar. His tentacles writhed with nervousness, but he understood what the humans were asking him to do. "Humans choose the back row because they assume they are going to lose," he said. "This assumption forces them to plan for survival rather than victory. They position themselves where they can observe threats, control retreat routes, and turn defensive positions into tactical advantages." "Cowardice," General Thokmar spat. "Effectiveness," Kethvar corrected. "In 17 first contact scenarios, humans face superior enemy forces. They survived by refusing to fight where their enemies expected them to fight." Martinez activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's spiral structure. "The Devourers advance along predictable routes, consuming resources as they go. They expect us to meet them with massed fleets at strategic choke points." The display showed the proposed battle at Nexus Point. "If we fight them there, we lose. Our entire military capacity will be destroyed in a single engagement." "Then where do we fight them?" asked Admiral Vortak. "Everywhere," Hayes answered. "And nowhere." The humans' plan was unlike anything the galaxy had ever attempted. Instead of one massive fleet, they proposed breaking their forces into thousands of small groups. Instead of defending fixed positions, they would use the galaxy's own structure as a weapon. "We abandon the outer systems," Martinez explained as the display showed human strategy in motion. "But we do not abandon them empty. We leave behind automated systems, delayed explosives, and resource denial mechanisms." "You would destroy our own worlds?" Chancellor Mordek asked in horror. "We would make them inedible," Hayes replied. "The Devourers consume matter to fuel their advance. If that matter is contaminated or booby-trapped, it weakens them instead of strengthening them." The display showed the second phase of the plan. Small fleet elements harass their supply lines and retreat before they can respond effectively. "We force them to spread their forces to protect their flanks." "This is not warfare," General Thokmar protested. "This is pest behavior." "Exactly," Martinez agreed. "We become a pest they cannot eliminate. Every system they take costs them more resources than they gain. Every advance leaves them more vulnerable to attack from behind." Kethvar studied the human plan with growing admiration. It was exactly what he would expect from a species that had learned to survive as prey animals. They were not trying to defeat the Devourers in direct combat. They were trying to make conquest so expensive that the Devourers would seek easier targets elsewhere. "The plan requires sacrifices," Hayes admitted. "We will lose systems. We will lose ships. We will lose people. But the species will survive." "And if your plan fails?" asked Scholar Vextai of the Luminary. "Then we fall back to the next defensive line and try again," Martinez said. "And if that fails, we fall back further. We keep falling back until we find something that works, or until there is nowhere left to retreat." You would turn the entire galaxy into a battleground, Chancellor Mordak realized. We would turn the entire galaxy into a trap, Hayes corrected. The Devourers are apex predators. They are used to overwhelming their prey through superior strength, but they have never faced prey that fights back the way humans fight back. The debate continued for hours. Most delegates wanted to proceed with the massive fleet engagement. It was glorious. It was honorable. It was what civilized species did when faced with extinction. But Kethvar had learned enough about human psychology to recognize what others could not see. The humans were not proposing cowardice. They were proposing warfare so ruthless and patient that it would make the Devourers regret ever entering this galaxy. I support the human plan, Kethvar announced, shocking his own delegation. General Takmar turned to stare at him. You would follow the cowards to inglorious defeat? I would follow the survivors to unlikely victory, Kethvar replied. Every species in this chamber considers itself superior to humans in some way. We are stronger, smarter, more advanced, more civilized. But humans have one advantage none of us possess, which is, they assume they are going to lose, so they plan to win anyway. The vote was close, but the human plan was approved. Not because the majority believed it would work, but because it was the only alternative to certain defeat. 3 years later, Kethvar stood in the rebuilt council chamber and watched the news reports from the former Devourer territories. The Great Swarm had withdrawn to dark space, their forces depleted and demoralized by a galaxy that refused to fight fair. The humans had been right. Species that assumed victory would fight gloriously and die. Species that assumed defeat would fight dirty and survive. Ambassador Martinez still sat in the back row, taking notes and watching for new threats. Because to humans, survival was not a destination. It was a process that never ended. Kethvar had finally learned why humans always chose the back row. It was not the position of the weak. It was the position of those who planned to be the last one standing, when everything else had fallen. And in a galaxy full of apex predators, who had never learned to think like prey, that made humans the most dangerous species of all.